Welcome back to another episode of the Career Discovery Podcast, the show where we have conversations with experts in their fields to understand their career insights, inspiring journeys, and empowering career advice. Lizzie is no ordinary professional. She is a soil scientist and co-managing director in the UK's environmental services sector. Yes, you heard it right, soil science. In this episode, Lizzie takes us on a captivating journey through her world, uncovering the fascinating realm of soil science and busting many myths about her profession. Join us as we explore the profound impact of soil science on our environment and our daily lives. Whether you're considering a career as a soil scientist or simply looking for inspiration, this conversation promises to deepen your understanding of the world beneath our feet and the remarkable career of a soil scientist. So let's dive in. Lizzie, hello, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Jo, good to see you.
All right. Before we get into it, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it for?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so my name's Lizzie Segoo. I'm a soil scientist. I live just outside Cambridge with my family. I have been in my current job for 20 years now. I actually started at the company I am with on the 1st of July 2003. So I've just had my 20-year service certificate. So whilst that's a long time to stay in one role, I'm still at the same office, the same desk. That role has changed massively since I first started. So the role's kind of grown with me. When people ask me what I do and I say I'm a soil scientist, it's great because you look at their faces and they're thinking, what do you actually do? I think people think maybe spend my time out in a field or in a lab. Yes, that's what I do.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I'm looking forward to deep diving into all things soil soon. But this is a podcast, Lizzie, and I'm wondering if you enjoy podcasts, and if so, could you share some of your favourites with us?
Yeah, definitely. So I spend quite a bit of time out walking the dog or out running. So I do listen to podcasts and I also listen to audiobooks. I subscribe to far more podcasts than I manage to listen to. I think my to listen to list is like my to read list. It's kind of aspirational. But there's a couple that I listen to fairly regularly. So I quite like Rangan Chatterjee's Feel Better, Live More podcast. That's a great one. They are, he does long form conversation with a range of different people looking at how to live better, look after yourself, things like sleep, exercise, diet, etc. So they're good ones to remind yourself to take care of yourself. I also listen to Farming Today. That's a daily podcast. It's sort of 10 to 15 minutes. Being a soil scientist, a lot of our work is in the agricultural sector, so that's quite a good one just to keep up to date with what's happening. Yeah, and I also like audiobooks. I listen to quite a few non-fiction audiobooks when I'm out and about as well.
Yeah, I love I was speaking to somebody when I was out running last night, because it really is brilliant, isn't it? He was going on a long drive to Wales and he said, I just don't know if I can be bothered to be sat in the car for so long, especially on a hot day. And I just said, well, download an audiobook or download a couple of podcasts. The time will fly. And that's just it, isn't it? It really is a great thing to be doing while you're doing something else. So, and I love the Feel Better, Live More one. It's on my weekly schedule of my must listens. So, Lizzie, you said it. There are so many misconceptions about the work we do. So I would love to know some of the misconceptions about the work your friends and family think you're doing.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't really know whether my friends and family know what I'm doing. I actually went on holiday with some of my friends a while ago and we were driving around and I sort of looked over the hedge of a field and made a comment, and one of my friends looked at me and said, "You do realise none of us have any idea what exactly it is you do." I think they think that I do geeky soil stuff and walk around fields, which is a little bit of what I do, but not all of it. Not really sure about my family. Obviously, during COVID, when we were all at home, my husband got an insight into all my team schools, and he definitely picks up on odd words and projects that we're working on. So
yeah. So if you had to explain to a 5-year-old what you do or what the purpose of your role is, how would you describe it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's interesting actually, because I have got involved with quite a lot of STEM activities. So I'm a STEM ambassador. So that's science, technology, engineering, maths. Like trying specifically to do that, to get out into schools and talk to kids about what you do. So I've had to, and I've done quite a few this last year, both in primary schools and in secondary schools. So then I've had to take that down to explain to people what I do. So usually I start by explaining why soil is amazing and why it's really important that we protect it. Fundamentally all life on Earth exists because of soil. And if you think about where we live, if you look around you, we influence. There's not much area in this country that we're not changing or managing in some way. And a lot of the land is under agriculture for food. So we're managing the land by agriculture, we're influencing it. And in doing that management, we impact on the soil. And that the main challenge is where we damage the soil by the way we manage it. So we start by talking about how important soil is, how it's fundamental to life, and how it's really important that we protect it. And ultimately, most of my work centres around understanding soils and also then understanding how we can manage our soils better to make sure we protect those. Because you may have seen, occasionally you get in the press headlines like 60 harvests left, scaremongering headlines that we're degrading our soil, we're cultivating it, we're putting it under pressure, we're losing topsoil, and potentially the threat that poses to us as a society. So, I wouldn't go that extremes, but it's definitely a significant challenge. And I think that we're beginning to realise the scale of that challenge and how important it is that we do take action to protect our soils and, ideally improve them into the future.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful because from soil, everything grows, right? All our food, all of the plants, it's everything.
You don't, what I usually say to kids if they go to school, you don't normally think about it, do you? What you walk on. You don't think much about the world beneath your feet, but it is a massive world beneath your feet. When we're trying to get kids enthused about soil, you'll say, in a teaspoon of soil, there's more living organisms than there are people in the world. There's a massive amount that we don't know about soil. So, there's a huge amount still to learn about how it functions. But what we do know is that we have degraded soil. So it's mainly through, agriculture and producing food for us all to eat, that in doing that, we cultivate the soil. So we've got tractors and we plough and we disc and we till the soil to create a seedbed to plant our crops. And then we spread fertilizer and plant protection products on to try and grow the best crop that we can. And we've been very successful at feeding the world. The population has expanded massively and we've fed that population. By and large, we've produced enough food in order to feed the world, which is a massive achievement. But what we're starting to realise now is that has come at a cost. So what we need to do is we need to be able to continue feeding the world. But we need to try and do our absolute best in doing that to minimise the impact on the soils and try and take actions to try and regenerate and improve them. Because it's not something that in the past has had that much thought. We've managed to get the yields year on year, and it's only sort of more recently that we're starting to see the massive loss of carbon from our soils, soil erosion, nutrient losses to our watercourses as well. So I think our understanding has grown, and now we need to take action. And change the way we manage our land.
Yeah, absolutely. And things like weather that impacts the soil, is that part of the work as well, or is it mainly around?
No, definitely. And climate change is obviously, very forefront of a lot of people's mind. And with soils, they're actually a massive carbon store. So there's more carbon in the soil than there is in the vegetation in the atmosphere combined. And so the way we've managed soil in the past has actually contributed to climate change. We have a lot of carbon in the soil. But what happens is if we go out and we cultivate the land, so if you think about, a tractor going through the field with a plough on the back of it, or a cultivator, it turns the soil. There's a reason we do that. It's not just reckless cultivation. We do that because we want to create a seedbed to grow the next crop.
Yeah.
And it's a good way of getting rid of weeds. But what we haven't realised is that turning of the soil encourages the breakdown of organic matter and the loss of carbon. So that carbon in the soil goes up into the atmosphere as CO2. And what we're now realising is there's been this long-term decline in soil organic matter. So we've had a long-term transfer of carbon from the soil to the atmosphere, which is obviously not good from a climate change perspective.
Yeah.
But it's also not good from what we would call a soil health perspective, because all organic matter, which contains carbon, is fundamental to soil health and soil functioning. So what we tend to see is that as the soil loses organic matter, it's not as resilient to shocks and to climate, drought, floods, etc. So, if we've got soil that's got a good organic matter level, it's more resilient. It's got a better soil structure, so it's less likely to compact. It will absorb more rainfall. It's more resistant to erosion. So it's kind of like as the organic matter levels go down, you see all these other negative effects. But conversely, what's been going down, we've now realised, the impact of management practices. We can change that. There are things that we can do to improve the management of soil and increase the amount of organic matter and carbon. And there's a lot of interest and enthusiasm in that at the moment. So there's a term, a lot of people using the term regenerative agriculture at the moment, which is kind of in the name. It's all about improving, regenerating the system. And so there's a really big focus there on trying to get organic matter, trying to minimise any further loss of organic matter and trying to build more organic matter in the soil, because potentially soils could be a big carbon sink. We could take carbon that's in the atmosphere through plants. Plants grow in the soil, they absorb the carbon, they then return to the soil. That then, that plant residue can then contribute to building organic matter. Soils could be part of the solution in the future.
Yeah. So it sounds as though it's about you and your peers, I guess, have identified that the cost, and now it's about taking action and trying to make our soil more sustainable for the future. Yeah.
So there's still lots, the basic principles are there and they're sound and we all know them, but there's still lots of questions like, if I stop ploughing my field and I direct drill it, like, how much will I increase my carbon content by? How long will it take? If I put manures on, like, what impact will that have? And, quite sometimes there are other factors to consider as well. So something like use of organic manures, so livestock manures, they're really good for adding organic matter to soil. But if you manage them badly, there's also a risk of pollution to the water and the air. So there's lots of other factors. So a lot of the work we're doing, it's trying to understand all the factors and look at management practices that, do the best that we can for the soil, the environment, and also food, crop production and profitability as well.
Yeah.
So those are the sort of challenges we're sort of working with. And, because the agriculture is the main sort of land-based industry. It covers most of the land in the country. So most soil scientists, by default, work in the agriculture, linked to farming. But that's not the only role. You'll get soil scientists that are specialists in peatland management, forestry, etc. There's a massive range of types of jobs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm just wondering about further afield than the UK. Are there similar scientists operating in other parts of the world doing
Oh yeah,
similar
yeah,
things?
yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, and we have, I think it's one of the really nice things about the job is the international connections that you build of other people working elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, the challenges, it's a similar sort of challenges you face across the world. Obviously different because, um, the geology, the soil
Yeah,
types, the climate, the food production varies across, countries. I mean, if you're in a dry, arid environment, your challenges are quite different to here
yeah,
in the UK, where we're a more temperate environment. But yeah, there's definitely research organisations and institutes across the world working on similar sorts of challenges. And
yeah,
yeah, we know quite a few of them. We try and work with them, when we have opportunity, and then quite
yeah,
often we meet at conferences to sort of learn from and see what other people are doing, which is really nice.
yeah. Oh, thank you. And Lizzie, can you help us understand which, I guess, industry or sector this work falls within? Because you've mentioned that a lot of the work you do is looking at agriculture, but it doesn't sound like it is the agriculture industry. So can you shed some light on that, please?
It's kind of like, well, I would say I'm more in R&D
Okay.
science,
Yeah.
supporting the food and farming, land-based environment
Yeah.
sectors.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I work, the company that I work for, we're a commercial company, but we do R&D and
Yeah.
consultancy, very similar sort of work to a lot of the other research institutes,
Yeah.
in the country, and a lot of universities as well.
Yeah. Makes sense. And so would typical clients or stakeholders include like government,
Yeah,
food
yeah.
manufacturers, that
So
kind of thing?
if you think about our client base, we've got quite a diverse range of clients, but our top
Yeah.
one is DEFRA.
Yeah.
So years ago, we were part of government. So
Okay.
the company that I work for, we were set up around the wartime, with a
Yeah.
specific aim to support UK food production. So ADAS originally stood for the Agricultural Development and Advisory Service. So we were
Yeah.
the extension service that
Yeah.
supported farmers with practical trials and advice. And then we were privatised in 1996.
Yeah.
But still, a lot of the work we do is for DEFRA, so
Yeah.
the UK Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. So they will come out with, it's work that we have to bid for, but what will normally
Yeah.
happen is they will maybe come out with a tender and say, look, we've got this problem, or we need an answer to this question. And then they'll invite companies to bid for it. And then
Yeah.
we will produce a tender to say, this is what we think you need to do in order to answer this question. This is our approach. This is the
Yeah.
timescale. This is how much it's going to cost. So DEFRA, but we also do work for, we do quite a bit. The European Commission is actually quite a big client for us. So we
Yeah.
collaborate with research institutes and other companies across Europe on a number of Horizon Europe
Yeah.
programs. So big collaborative R&D projects, which are great to be involved with, working with
Yeah.
multiple partners. But we do also do work for commercial companies producing products, maybe a
Yeah.
fertilizer product. You've got a company
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
produced a fertilizer product and they want to understand how it performs. They want that evidence to show how it performs that they can then use to help promote the product. So it's quite a range of different client
Yeah.
types.
Yeah. Really interesting. Thank you. So, Lizzie, if we were to zoom in on an average week in your working life, what would we find you doing? Where would we find you?
Well, normally in the office, not at home. As I mentioned earlier, I'm fortunately at home because I've got COVID at the moment. I'm not sure whether there is a typical week.
Yeah.
There's sort of so many different things that we do, but most of my time is project-based time.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, I've got 3 big multi-year projects that I'm sort of got quite a significant. I either manage or I've got a significant role in managing them
Yeah.
at various stages. So quite a bit of my time is spent on sort of running those. Usually there'll be a couple of projects that we've got ongoing, and there might be something that we're tendering for at the
Yeah.
moment. And it's things like on that project work, It's going to be like setting up the project,
Yeah.
finding the sites, writing the protocol. It's not just me that works on these projects. There's a whole team of people. So we'll have people that run the field work. So it's checking they know what they're doing, maybe going out with them. You know, if we've decided we're going to measure something, we haven't quite done it before. Quite often, a few of us will go out into the field, scratch our heads and sort of think, right, how are we going to do this? How can we make it work? And then time looking at the data, doing the stats on it, writing reports, and then lots of meetings. I seem to spend a lot of time on Teams, some of those internal meetings, but, you know, we also quite often talk to people outside the company, so presenting results to other researchers at conferences or groups of farmers, all sorts of different things. So at the moment I've got 3 big projects that I'm working on, and I've got one that tender recently that I've submitted that I'm waiting on. So I've got one project that's finishing and another one hopefully coming online soon.
Wow, thank you. And are there any specialist tools that you're using, whether that's when you're, I guess, designing the research, or the people who are doing the research, or when you're analysing the data? Are there any things that are specific to the work, tools-wise?
We've got our own dedicated field team at the company that do most of our field work. Over the years, we quite often had to build or design our own equipment to measure specific things, because if you've got something that you want to measure, quite often you can't just go and buy something off the shelf. So I'll give you an example. In a number of the projects that we do, quite often there's also an interest in impacts on air and water quality. So we would measure gaseous emissions of ammonia and nitrous oxide, and we measure losses to water as well. So measuring something like ammonia emissions isn't particularly straightforward. So we've actually had to build the equipment to do that. So then we own it, and so quite specialist. So we've got our own lab. We use a commercial lab for a lot of our soil testing, but we've got our own lab at the office where we do some of our own specialist tests as well. And there's always new, you know, there's always new things. So, you know, you never know, the next project that comes along might be wanting to measure something a little bit different, and we'll have to go back to the drawing board and work out how we're going to do that, and have we got the equipment we need, or do we need to try something out?
Thank you. It really does sound, I'm really feeling like I'm back in science lessons at school, and obviously this is on a completely different scale, but it is that, what's the hypothesis, what's the problem we're trying to solve, how are we going to solve it, measuring the results, and then here's the outcome. Am I kind of getting that right? Obviously, albeit on a very different scale.
And I do love that part of it. You know, you start off, you get the project, you've said you're going to measure all these things, or you're going to get these outcomes, and that first meeting when you all sit down, you're like, right, how are we going to do this? Let's make a plan. You know, it's great. And, you know, some of it, and obviously we've got our established methods that we've used over years, that we're very confident with, but quite often there's variations on those, or we have to amend them, you know, or things aren't quite as straightforward. So, I mean, I've got a project at the moment where we're looking at grazing management strategies, and then working with livestock is fun and adds an additional dimension to the work, because when you put your stuff out in the field, you know, if you've got cows around it, they're going to want to see it, you know, and you know, and you end up having to fence it off or devise new means of measuring. So, I mean, you quite often have to adjust what you're doing for the project or the site or whatever. But that's I think that's what makes it interesting.
And it feels like there's a natural beginning and an end. I guess that's the beauty of project work, isn't it?
And you always you start the project with a very clear idea of how it's going to work and how you're going to reach the answer, and then you deliver the project and you've gone off on a few tangents. You've pretty much answered the question, but you've got a whole load more questions that you now know are questions than when you started with. So you're never actually completely finished. There's always something else that you want to do.
And you said that often these projects are multi-year projects. So for anyone in the audience who's thinking, oh my goodness, how do you stay focused on a multi-year project? How would you answer that?
Yeah. I don't know, a year project to me would seem far too short. So like if I think about the projects I've got ongoing at the moment, they're usually 3 to 5 years. And a lot of that pins down to agricultural environmental research. It's always dangerous to test something on 1 year because do you ever get an average year? And if you think back to last year, if you've done project work and you just had last year that extreme drought, that's not necessarily representative. So usually if we're looking at something, generally you try multiple sites and multiple years to ensure that the results that you get are representative. So default quite often is let's have 3 years. But then the challenge with soil related research is that soils change slowly over time. So if you're wanting to look at the impact of a management practice on soil quality, 3 years really isn't enough. So I've got another project. So the project that I mentioned, we're working with grazing animals. That project is specifically looking at different grazing management strategies and the impact they have on soil quality. So that project has just been extended to 5 years because what we did is we went out at the beginning of the project and we baselined soil quality. So we went out to the sites. We have 9 different sites across the country and we took a really detailed programme of soil assessments when we started. And then we'll go back after 5 years and repeat them at the exact same places. And actually kind of, if you want to see a change in soil, 5 years is kind of a minimum. So, and it's nice over that time, quite often with a lot of these projects as well, it's our company, but we're also working with collaborators. You're working with host farmers. You get the opportunity to develop really good relationships with other collaborators and the other host farmers, such that it's actually when the project finishes, it's really quite sad, they become part of your, on your day-to-day work and part of your life. So it's great.
Oh, thank you for sharing. That's brilliant. What about the things that happen less frequently throughout the year in the life of a soil scientist that the audience might like to know about?
Okay. So in addition to sort of the project work, we will always try and get out to a few conferences a couple of times a year to meet with other, to present the work, the project work that we're doing, and also to meet with other researchers. And there's a couple of, there's a few different conferences that quite often conferences might run every other year. So there's one called the International Nitrogen Workshop that runs every couple of years. And it sort of happens at different countries around Europe. So a couple of times a year we'd want to go to those other conferences or meetings.
What about things like, scientific papers and so on? So as well as going to the conferences, are there journals and so on that you submit papers and things to?
So ideally, we would write up all our research and publish it in scientific journals. It's something that I'm quite bad at doing. Usually because when you write up a project, you always write it up as a report. So it's usually publicly available, and we will invariably go to a conference and present it. So people know about it. Ideally, then you write it up. What usually happens is we've already got enthused or onto the next project, and it kind of sits on that to-do list. So there are quite a few papers that I've got that I would like to write and that I haven't got to. And I think a lot of my colleagues would say the same thing. Presenting at conferences, publishing conference proceedings. We also publish in the more sort of the farming press as well. Because a lot of our work is directly relevant to the farming industry, it's important that we, you need to present your work to different audiences. Conferences are great for researchers, your scientific peers. But actually, if it's a project on improving soil management, it's actually the farmers that are managing the land that need to hear about it. So we also would try and get those results out to that audience by maybe going to journalists that write for some of the farming press, podcasts or webinars, or I mean, social media is great now. It's really good. Twitter in particular, a lot of farmers are on Twitter, and it's a great way of just updating people on what you're doing and putting links to presentations or articles, etc.
Fantastic, thank you. One of the things I'm quite like to do when we have a role that's perhaps not so well known is just kind of go behind the curtains a bit, because in your organisation, are you able to quickly share what other departments that people might find?
So I mentioned the company I work for, a company called ADAS. We are a company of about 350 people, and we work across the environment, agriculture and ecology sectors mainly. The section of the business that I'm in is, we call ourselves Sustainable Agricultural Systems, and we're about 150 people, so about half the business. And then within our part, we have different sectors. So we have a soils group, which I'm in. I think there's about 10 of us based around the country. We have a group of crop physiologists. We have a group of people that specialise in horticultural production. We've got a crop protection group that work more on crop pathology. A policy and economic group, because obviously that's an important component of it, and a modelling and informatics group as well. So we've got people doing a diverse range of things. And then we've got a dedicated field team. So we've got groups of field staff based out of each of our main offices that are the core to delivering a lot of the experiments. And they're really, really good. They're the ones that make our project work happen and do it right. So we might come up with an idea, write the protocol, and they're the ones that then take it and look at it and tell us where we've got it wrong or what we need to amend and how to make it work in the field.
Thank you. That's helpful, because so many different roles that I've never even heard of that just sit within that one business unit.
So I mentioned our part of it, which is the Sustainable Agricultural Systems. We've got a big environment group that do a lot of in ecology. We've got a group that do far more on-farm advice. So we work quite close with them because they take quite a lot of the information that we've got and they give that to farmers, but they're more directly working out with farmers. And we've got a team that look at more chemicals in the environment as well. So we're all doing different things. And then actually the company that we're in, ADAS, we were bought in 2006 by a company called the RSK Group, which is a group, UK-based company. I think we're about 200 companies. Now they've been growing by acquisition across the sort of land-based engineering industries. I think they're about 13,000 employees now, which has been really exciting because they've been on a massive journey of growth and we've been part of that. And that then opens up new opportunities to work with other people as well.
That's really interesting. And then I'm guessing as well, in addition to all of those, I guess, R&D facing activities, you also have a operations team with core functions like HR and finance and those kinds of departments as well.
So a lot of those core functionality, HR, IT, those sort of group functions are now at the RSK group level. And because they're such a big company, they've been able to put a lot of investment behind that. So we're seeing some really good stuff coming out of them now in terms of sustainability, staff management, training, etc. They've got some really great initiatives, which we kind of benefit, as a smaller company, we're benefiting from that resource at a bigger company level. And then within our company, the group I work in, we have an operations manager that makes sure that we've got all the equipment that we need. You make sure that we've got combines at each of our sites, and logistically the combines are where we need them to be. That we've got a program of replacement of kit. We've definitely got we need those other people to make sure that we've always got the resources in order to deliver the role that I deliver.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Lizzie, tell us what you love most about your role.
Always learning. It's never boring. Yes, I would say I've never got bored. The role has been great because it's just kind of evolved with me over time. So, I mean, one thing I would say about the role, I said I've been in the job 20 years, and I've never then applied for another job within the company. The role's just changed with me. But when you start, the job that I was doing, or my day-to-day work when I started, was very different to what it is now. So when I started, still working on the same sorts of projects, but my role in them was different. I was helping other people who led those projects, and I was learning from them. And then gradually over time, as you learn more, you're then allowed to, you then write your own tenders and you start delivering your own projects, smaller to start off with, and you grow that. And what's really nice is that we have a lot of control over what we do. And obviously I'm employed to do a job and I need to go to work and do that job. But in terms of the sorts of things I work on, I would say I've kind of created my own role and I've managed to direct it towards the things that, I like. Particularly, I mean, of the projects I'm working on at the moment, a couple of them were in response to tenders. So they're kind of targeted by the client. But the EU one that I'm just finishing, that was a tender that I put together with collaborators across Europe based on our ideas on something that we wanted to deliver. So we got a huge amount of influence to direct that. So there's always new challenges there. I think that's why I've never kind of looked elsewhere. It's always felt that there's more to learn and more to do. And you're never quite done. There's always always going to be the next project, and there's always going to be more to learn. So it's not it's never boring. It's always a school day.
What about the frustrations? What do you find frustrating or challenging about the work?
In terms of challenging, I think the main thing is managing time. And you know what? I think we're often our own worst enemies because you take on too much because something comes up and you look at it and you think, that's interesting, I want to do that. You don't think, I haven't got enough time to do that, I'm going to say no. There's always more that you want to be involved with, and that's great. So I think I'm not very good at accurately forecasting the amount of time things are going to take. I'm always massively over optimistic and take on too much. But that's good because it's things that I want to get, I want to get stuck into and I want to get involved with.
What would be a top tip that you'd give to somebody early in their career about learning to manage their capacity and boundaries and saying no when they need to?
Oh, I don't know. If they suss it, come and tell me. I think I'm trying to get more focused in terms of, because what's also challenging, Joe, and you might find this as well, is when you're working on lots of different things, particularly if you've got big project works on, what you really need is you need long stints at it, several hours or a couple of days to actually do something. So then what comes quite challenging is if you've got days with multiple teams meetings on, you feel you never quite manage to get into the big job that you need to do. So I'm still trying to tell myself I need to block time and manage my diary better to have those blocks so that I can actually get into the project work. But I mean, being disciplined about your time management and trying to, I think the other thing is just to be really focused. And I think we're all a little bit guilty of procrastination, aren't we? And perfectionism. And I'm sure in the past I've taken longer to write reports or presentations because I've been procrastinating over them or I've not managed to get them to be quite as good as I want. And, it's trying to be really focused. And I think we get better, or I've definitely got better at doing that the busier I've become, because you very much look at your time and think, right, if I'm going to work on this for 2 hours now, it needs to count and I need to be working. If I'm not working, I'm not focused, I might as well not be sat at my laptop, I might as well be doing something else. So trying to, my great ideal is that I work highly focused just within my working hours and deliver everything that I need to do. I'm not quite there yet, but that's the ideal.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? I mean, I can't remember the statistic, but something like it takes X amounts of minutes to get back into something if you've been distracted, if you've just come off a meeting. And one thing we did in my previous organisation, which worked pretty well, is we had meeting-free Fridays. So it just meant that you always had a day each week to dedicate to the deep work. And I do think that's one of the benefits of, the working from home, because you can kind of do that deep work without distractions. But it's tough and an ongoing struggle. Yeah. And the perfection thing, my old leader once said to me, perfection is the enemy of done. I thought it's very true.
Yeah, definitely. We quite often have the ideal report or presentation in our head, and just, how many times do you read a paragraph and just tweak it again, or,
just change that little word.
So it doesn't sound, you're looking at a sentence, it doesn't sound quite right, so you read the sentence 10 times when you could have written multiple other sentences and moved yourself further on. I think we all do it though, don't we?
Yeah, guilty. So, Lizzie, when you look back at the work you've been doing for the last 20 or so years, what makes you most proud?
I think all of it, really. It's quite hard to pick out sort of specific individual things. Getting my 20-year certificate, that was quite an achievement. And I'm really quite proud that I've been there for 20 years and that, the role's grown as I wanted it to grow. There's obviously, you can pick out specific highlights, particularly I'd probably put those around, big projects that we've won. Quite often you'll put in a huge amount of work to a tender. It's a piece of work you really want to do. And then when you pull it off and you win it, that's a really good feeling. And also then there's probably a few presentations that I've done over the time that I've been there, maybe the ones that I found quite challenging, or that, I was really quite pleased of when we'd completed them. I mean, we do a lot of public speaking, and it's something I think everyone finds a bit daunting to start off with. I think, hopefully now I've managed to crack it, but early on in your career, the first conference presentation that I did, I still remember it. It was back in 2005 in Murcia in Spain, and I can remember arriving there and walking into the auditorium, and your stomach just turns because you see how big it is, and you realise you're talking into a mic. And that presentation, I could have said it with my eyes closed. I'd learnt it off by heart, and I was really nervous, but I got through it. And I'd done it, and I was really proud that I completed it. And now it's a lot easier. I don't think anyone sort of finds it easy to start off with, but it's just something that you have to keep pushing yourself for. So there's definitely a few of those over my career that I felt that were sort of step ups, or as such, bigger audiences or longer presentations or higher profile ones that you step up for. You're feeling quite nervous, but then once you've done them, you're really quite pleased with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Public speaking, I think it's the number one fear of most people.
When you look at, more junior colleagues that are joining and where they're standing up and doing presentations, you know how they're feeling, and you're looking at them and they're brilliant, they're great, they can speak really well, they present really well. So it's trying to get across to them, it's all those nerves that you had when you started, am I going to be clear enough? Everybody's going to know I'm nervous. And I think you kind of take how you felt. You have to remember how you felt that first time you did your big presentation, and then, try and offer that support to other people that are doing the same thing. But it's just one of those things that you just have to keep doing. And I did kind of give myself a rule years ago where if somebody asked me to speak at an event or do something, if my first initial thought was, I'd love to do that, I can't see myself doing it, or I don't think I'll be brave enough to do it, just to say yes really quickly. And then you deal with it later and you get yourself through it. I think definitely continuing to challenge yourself and making sure you do it more often. Obviously, COVID changed a lot of things, didn't it? We had to get used to a new way of speaking. And then I have to say the first time then standing up in front of an audience again after COVID, that was a bit strange again, people. Whereas it's quite nice when you can see people, and rather than just talking to because quite often when you're talking on webinars, you're just talking to a blank screen. You can't see any of that audience interaction, which is quite good as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So if anyone's out there thinking, oh my goodness, I've got to do a presentation at uni, or oh my goodness, I'm about to do my first presentation at work or public speaking event, what maybe top 3 tips would you give to them?
I think I'd want to reassure them that they would be great and that they would do better than they would think. You always imagine it in your mind to be a bigger thing than it actually is. What I always try to do is, particularly if it's a meeting or new people, because quite often in our area of work you end up going into a group to present to a group of completely new people, sometimes that you've never met before, and I always try and get in and talk to a couple of them first, because when you're giving a presentation, it's better if it's like a chat. You're just having you're talking just to a group of people that you know, because if you think about it, we're all experts in our own areas, and if you were just sat chatting to your friend, you'd be able to explain it all, no problem, and you wouldn't get nervous. So you have to try and reframe it like that you're just chatting to a group of people. So I quite often find if when you arrive and you have a cup of tea, if you can chat to a couple of other people, then when you stand up and you do your presentation, you've got a couple of people that you've spoken to. Catch people's eye, find a few people in the audience that are engaged with you, and you can look at them, and actually seeing their facial expressions, them responding to you, is really good as well.
Yeah.
But I think we definitely, in retrospect, I definitely got more nervous than I ever needed to about a lot of presentations.
Yeah. Well, great tips. Thanks for sharing. Okay, Lizzie, let's go all the way back to the beginning. When you were at school, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think I had a fairly random group of careers that I've said over the years. So when I was at primary school, I can remember saying I wanted to be an artist. So when I was at primary school, I think a lot of kids are, they're quite creative, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like drawing. So I thought I'd like to be an artist. And then that evolved into an architect. So my dad was an architect. So I thought then I'd be an architect for a little while. But then I remember my dad once saying to me, one of his friends had come around who was a structural engineer. He told me the structural engineers earn lots of money. So for a little while, I thought I'll be a structural engineer. But I think in retrospect, doing anything just for the money is a really bad move. You spend so much of your life at work that it needs to be something that you like. And then when I went to sixth form, I didn't really get on too well with A-levels. I didn't like them. I wasn't really sure whether I wanted to progress from A-levels to university. I felt I wasn't cut out for it. And at that stage, I felt I should do something quite radical. And I can remember saying that I was going to go and join the army, which my mum wasn't too keen on. And I don't think the sixth form were too keen on. So they managed to get me into university. So I don't know whether any of those were ever particularly serious, but people always ask you, don't they, what do you want to do, and you have to come up with an answer. Yeah. So I definitely at primary or secondary school wasn't saying I want to be a soil scientist.
I'm really curious about the A-levels. What wasn't jiving for you? Why were you feeling out of sync?
I think quite often you see people that sort of get on at a certain stage, and then they hit another stage, and it's not, they don't quite like it. We all do well at different moments. I mean, I really liked the secondary school that I went to. It was a little bit smaller. I did really well at my GCSEs, and I went and did A-levels, and it was far more academic college, and it really shook my confidence. I suddenly felt like I wasn't good enough anymore. and I wasn't sure whether I was really cut out for that. Which is interesting because, you know, then if I look what I've then gone on to do, but actually, and I didn't, you know, I got okay A levels, I got a B and 2 C's, but I'd got offered a place at Leeds University to do geography, and the entry requirements were 2 B's and a C, so I didn't get it. They let me in anyway, but when I arrived there, and I was saying to myself, you know, you'll give this a go. If it doesn't work out, you'll just leave. And I was also saying to myself, everybody that's here is cleverer than you, you know, that's done better than you. So if you want to do well here, you're going to have to work really hard. And so I did put my head down and I worked really hard. And then I can remember one of our first year modules, they used to put the marks on, they used to print them out and stick them in a corridor so you could see everyone's mark. And I remember going and looking, and I was in the top 3 of the whole, you know, year for that course. And so you sit and think, okay, maybe I can do it. So, and I think, you know, in retrospect, you know, you don't want to cruise through all stages of life, do you? I think it's sometimes good to have a challenge, you know, and I definitely don't regret anything about A levels. I think, you know, I think it was good for me to have gone through that, and everything's worked out well. In the end.
I think you're right. Sometimes it's good to have that failure early on, isn't it? Because if you sail through everything and then don't fail at anything to your, I don't know, late 20s or into your 30s or 40s, then it's going to come as a real hard shock to you. But we obviously went to the same sixth form college, and I know exactly what you mean. I felt like I was top of the class at my secondary school, and then when I moved into the sixth form college, all of a sudden I was kind of languishing in the middle, and it really knocked my confidence too. I felt like, I actually felt quite stupid, if I'm honest. You know, managed to do okay, and I also went to Leeds Uni, but it's, I don't know, there almost needs to be some guidance around that, adjusting from being a big fish in a small pond to being a how would you say it? A small fish in a big pond. Because
we both probably went from secondary schools where we were one of the cleverest, and as a younger teenager, I definitely needed that reassurance. You know, I thrived on doing well and being good at things, and then I hit sixth form where I was just average, sometimes not doing brilliantly well, and that really shook my confidence. But then I shouldn't have needed that. I needed that external validation, and I think that was part of actually me growing up and you know, getting through that. And you know, it's one stage in life, isn't it? And then you move on to the next. Don't look back.
Oh, thank you. And amazing that you kind of, for whatever reason, you knew that you had to work hard when you got to university, and you did, and that really paid off. And then you had the evidence then that you were good enough. And I wonder if the second and third year were easier because you'd got that evidence of the first year.
I think once I'd got there and I settled in and I realised I could do it, then, you know, we were off. It was fine. I really enjoyed university. I did geography at Leeds. I picked that subject because it was the subject I liked the most. I found it really interesting. So you go to university and you get to spend all your time on a subject that you found interesting. You know, I liked going and sitting in the library and reading the papers and books that we'd been set, and learned a huge amount there. I mean, it's a big life change as well, isn't it? Moving away from home and going to university, living on your own, making a new group of friends, you know, structuring all your time on your own. Leeds is a fantastic place, you know. I've got very fond memories of it. A fantastic part of my life. So that was great. And so I was there. Well, I did my undergraduate for 3 years there. And then I stayed on to do a PhD.
Wow.
And I was quite lucky there, actually, in that I hadn't really given a huge amount of thought to what I wanted to do when I finished my PhD. It was at the point where the department was starting to send out, all those emails about careers fairs or master's courses as well.
Yeah.
And I can remember one of the lecturers saying to me, have you thought about what you want to do when you finish? And I hadn't. So I sort of said, maybe a master's.
Yeah.
And the lady sort of said, well, what about a PhD? And I sort of said, maybe.
Yeah.
And I got put in contact with one of the other professors, and they'd got a few sort of ideas for PhDs, and they said, what about this? And I actually did my PhD on short rotation willow coppice, and sort of nutrient cycling and nutrient management. That was sort of a biomass crop grown as a fuel. So he said, I've got this idea, what do you think? And I was like, sounds good to me. Because when we did the geography degree, geography is like a huge subject, isn't it? You do, we do modules on Arctic and alpine environments, tropical environments, coastal erosion, but at Leeds we had quite a big soils focus as well. And I really like the soil and water quality elements to that. So, you kind of, as I've gone through, GCSEs to A-levels to university, you're kind of honing in the bits that you like the most and taking those on to the next stage. So I basically was offered the PhD, and it was great. And so I stayed on there to do the PhD, and a PhD is 3 years.
Yeah.
And I actually, the job that I'm in, I wasn't looking for a job when the advert came out. I just started the 3rd year of my PhD. I joined the British Society of Soil Science, and I was on a mailing list they'd got, and I had an email. One of the emails that popped up had the job advert for the job in Cambridge, and I can remember opening it and thinking, that looks just like the sort of thing I'd like to do when I am finished.
Yeah.
At this point, I wasn't close to being finished, and I'd sort of shut it. But it was strange. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, it really played on my mind. And I went back and looked at it a couple of times. And then eventually I took it to my supervisor and I said to her, what do you think? And she said, well, why don't you go for it?
Yeah.
And so I did. And I got the job. And I actually switched my PhD to part-time in order to take the job. So, ideally, you do your PhD, you finish it, and then you start work. But, the job advert, location as well, back in Cambridge, it was all ideal. And it's worked out. It's worked out really well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. With the PhD, for anybody who might be thinking they might like to find out a bit more about how a PhD works, and I am aware that it could be, quite different now because it was some years ago, Lizzie, but can you give us a sense of, how one chooses a topic and what does the funding look like for a PhD?
Yeah. So a lot of university departments will have a certain number of funded PhD places. So some universities will have their own central funding and will fund a few PhDs. You will also get PhDs funded associated with bigger grants. So the university department might have a grant to do a specific area of work, and they'll have a PhD associated with that. And then usually they will advertise those PhDs and you can apply to them. So the overall topic is already defined. If you go for it and you get that PhD, you still have the scope to evolve that and add your own slant to it. But the broad topic is already defined. And most of those are funded places. So I must admit, I'm not entirely sure what the current funding rates are. But, you're not paying fees anymore. And it's enough to live tightly on. A lot of PhD students will work at the same time, and quite often you'll work in the department. So when I was doing my PhD, we worked as demonstrators for the undergraduates, so you supported the undergraduates, and that worked really well because the pay was relatively good. It was in the same area, so you could just dip in or out. So I would say if you're interested in a PhD or a master's, you need to research at the individual university departments. Their website should have details. What I would say though is I'm not wouldn't want to say that PhD is essential for my role. What a PhD is really good for, it's kind of like a personal learning journey, really. You've basically got 3 years to manage your own time and plan a research project. It's a huge luxury, but you learn a massive amount really about yourself. You need to plan it all out yourself. You've got a couple of supervisors, but you're largely on your own. So, I mean, when I look back at my PhD now, with my knowledge now, I could have done it so much better. But a lot of that was about making those mistakes, that learning journey. If I look at the people that we've kind of got working for us, quite a few of the consultants coming in do come into us with masters or with PhDs, and we value that experience of understanding the research process, that technical understanding as well. But we do have really good consultants that don't have PhDs. And we also, I mentioned already that we've got a field team. Our field teams basically do a lot of the practical work of our big research projects. And what I would say is that, 2 or 3 years work experience in our field team, I think for us would be viewed as equivalent to a PhD, because you get that same sort of really practical experience. I think if you wanted to do research within a university setting, you wanted to be more purely academic, then you do need that academic qualifications, masters or PhDs. But we are particularly keen not to restrict ourselves or define the qualifications we want staff to have. Because most of what I do now I've learned on the job, and it's more important to us when we look to recruit that we get someone who is willing to learn and interested. If you've got someone that's really interested, they'll do really well. They'll learn, they'll pick it up. So we are, and that's something we're trying to say more now. I mean, the recruitment market has got that much harder. There's not enough people for the jobs that are out there. So you have to kind of expand who you're advertising to. And even now with our field teams, in the past, again, most people joining the field teams have degrees, in environmental science. Again, that's not a prerequisite for joining the field team. And when we put job adverts out now, we'll say that whilst a degree is preferred, it's not essential, and that training will be provided. So, if you get the right person in there and they work hard and they learn, I wouldn't want someone to think that necessarily, academic achievements are great and they obviously demonstrate that to your employer, but it's not the only route.
Thank you. And I think that's great, because I think it's more inclusive as well, because some people's circumstances mean that they can't go to uni or stay on to do the PhD, so it's great to know that you guys are an inclusive employer. Okay, so then that brings you to the organisation you're with today, and I wonder if you want to call out any kind of key highlights or changes on your journey through your current organisation. I think you touched on earlier the types of work that you were doing, but I wonder if you want to call out any of the key transitions.
It's really kind of been a natural evolve. The role has naturally evolved over time, and you can see those moments where I've gone from being somebody that's delivering into somebody else's project. The first times then that my name's going down as the lead scientist on a proposal. That's great. You sort of gradually you expand your reputation and your experience over time, and then sort of over time as well, you also get more involved in the management of the organisation and working with other people and thinking more strategically. So you go, when I started, when you're new, it's more about, who's helping you, who are your mentors in the organisation. So when I first started, I can remember being struck by the number of people that have been there for ages. And now I'm one of those people. But, when I first started, there's quite a few people that have since retired. And they all had a big impact on me. They helped train me, they mentored me, etc. And then actually that balance changes as new people come into the organisation after you. And then your role changes to take responsibility then for supporting and mentoring the people that are coming in behind you as well. And then more recently, my role has sort of changed a bit again, because we've had a change to management within the sector of the business that I'm in. The person that had led it for quite a number of years is looking to retire. So he's moved out of his current role, and we've actually, there's 4 of us that have taken on that sort of managing director role in a co-leadership arrangement for women. It's fantastic.
Love it.
And actually, it's a bit different. It's actually worked really well. So we started that, been doing that for 2 years. So none of us wanted to lose our technical role. Ultimately, we're all scientists. None of us wanted not to do that project work anymore. We all wanted that. The opportunity to be more involved in the direction strategy of the business is really exciting. So we all wanted that, but we didn't want to be just managers. So by sharing that role, we've all got to retain a little bit of our project work as well, and our kind of technical role, whilst also taking on, responsibility for the business. And the other 3 I'm working with are brilliant. And, taking on that challenge with them, it's been kind of daunting, but it's been really exciting. And I feel really backed up with them. They're a great group. So there's lots of exciting things in the future. But I mean, that's been a big challenge. That was probably one of the biggest changes to the role, because you are then taking on, it's budget, it's hiring, it's strategy, all those sorts of things in quite a challenging time, because the economy, it's a challenging time for a lot of organisations. There's huge pressure under budgets and pay. And so we need to drive performance, we need to win more work, all these sorts of things. You need to think strategically in terms of who our client base are, who we want to do more work with, etc. So, and I was trained as a scientist. I wasn't trained as a manager. So we're all learning. Hopefully we've done an all right job, but I'm sure we'll get better with time.
Yeah, but it sounds really great that it sounds like you're learning together, which I think's really, really powerful. And it shows the power of teamwork, doesn't it? And I also love that you are able to retain some of the technical work that you love, because I think so often what happens when somebody is moved into a leadership role, they have to relinquish the thing they love, and then that can be really difficult. And actually it can put people off that move. So this sounds like a really, really great way that you and the team have managed to do this.
And it's worked really well. I mean, you still need to, it's your role evolving over time, isn't it? And the challenge I still have now is on the project work. I now need to let other people step up as well and do more of my old role. So there is a tendency just to think, I'm just going to do that, and it's sort of, training up others and also giving others the opportunities that I've had as well.
Passing the baton. When you look back at your career journey so far, what's been the biggest challenge or failure or limiting belief you've had to overcome?
I think it's all part of the journey, isn't it? Obviously, there are moments that are maybe a little bit trickier or harder than others, but I think they all kind of come together to kind of make your career what it is. And looking back, I don't think I would have changed anything at all. I mean, I would say that when I had my kids, that probably was one of the more challenging moments of my career, because it's you have your personal life and your professional life colliding, and it's quite hard to manage. So I had my so I've got two boys, Cavan who's 13 and Aaron who's 17. So I had Aaron, I'd been working at the company for 3 years when I had him. And you're emotionally at quite a vulnerable time as well when you have kids as well. And I wasn't entirely sure that I wanted to go back to work full time. I think I was not sure what other people expected me to do. And new parents, you put yourself under a huge amount of pressure, and we worry far too much about what other people think. So I was definitely worried that if I went back to work full time, that would make me a bad mother. And that's kind of what I said to myself. So I found going back to work really hard. But on the rational side of things, I'm saying to myself, you studied all these years. Done all, and you've worked for 3 years. Like, don't be ridiculous. You can't leave like now. And I mean, I went back to work full time. We did have the discussion about potentially going back part time, and I thought that's what people do. People have kids and they go back to work part time and they manage it like that. And in retrospect, I was fine working full time. My husband's default assumption was that I would go back full time. And I think that was quite helpful. He wasn't pushing me to go back to work full time, but he knew what I got out of my job. And so he knew that was important for me. And also my line manager at the time, John, who sort of managed me the majority of the time I've been there, he's been brilliant. I can remember going and saying to him, I want to come back 3 days a week. And he said, well, why don't you just come back and try it? Just come back. And he said, well, whatever you want is fine. You do what you want, but just come back and try it. And also I think he probably knew as well that I could come back full time. And it was just that gentle encouragement. And you get back, and it was really hard, but I managed it. And now I'm pleased. I'm not saying that working full time is the thing to do. A lot of people work part time. That's fine. But what I'm highlighting is that was definitely a point in my career where I felt quite vulnerable. You're questioning, are you a good mum? Are you good at your job? But I think my husband and people at work were very supportive, and that had that was hugely beneficial. But I think that juggling home and small kids is a really tough time for people. But I think you also need to go through that so that particularly now when there's other people in the organisation going through the same thing, you want to kind of keep an eye out for them as well, because you know how tricky it can be.
And I think it's kind of just figuring out what's right for you, isn't it? And it sounds like your line manager was really quite flexible, almost in saying try it, because if it doesn't work, we have got these other options, but maybe give it a go. And it sounds like it was the right thing.
Work were brilliant, and for a little while I think I was a bit of an emotional wreck, but kind of work myself through it, and I think it's important when you look back that we do admit the fact that they were quite hard moments of our careers, because I definitely wouldn't want someone new in our organisation who was going through that to look up and think, oh, they had it all sussed, they managed it fine, because we all muddled our own way through it. I don't think any of us had it particularly sussed, but I mean, if I look at my kids now, they're absolutely fine. And I think it's important to also provide that role model for your children of two parents that work, and both who do worked hard, and we do good jobs.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier about the role of mentors and role models early in your career, and I'm really curious, when you look back on the career so far, what would you say was the power of mentors or role models or sponsors in your career?
Oh, definitely massive. I mean, I've never kind of we talk a lot now about mentors, and when I started, it was never formally mentioned, and there was all informal relationships. But there were, a couple of individuals. My line manager, John, is, who still works for the company. He's definitely one of them. But there's a couple of other people as well who've since retired, who I owe a lot of my training to. So they're people that spent time training me up. They're people who basically it's through working on their projects with them, but they then took the time to explain things to me, put the right things to read in front of me. And they're also the people that kind of give you that gentle shove. If you're working on a project together, they give you the opportunity to present in a meeting. It might be their project.
Yeah.
But they say, right, you do this bit. So they help gently raise your profile. They encourage you to present at conferences and things like that. I mean, I can remember we had a person called Brian who headed our group for quite a few years, and he was absolutely brilliant. And he was very good at giving you, I don't know how often they call them gentle shoves, but I can remember he wanted me to do run some training courses on it. It was a slightly different technical area. And it was one of those moments where, it was new to me and I was struggling a little bit. I was trying my best and got all the reading. I'd spent ages looking at it. And I remember one moment on the phone and I said to him, Brian, why are you making me do this? I don't think I'm going to do a very good job. And he was just like, you'll be fine. You'll be great. And it was that attitude, and I probably at that point might have been at my limits, but it's all these people that just give you that push and they kind of know you can do a little bit more. So they push you on a little bit more and give you those opportunities as well. So definitely, So, and within our roles, none of us work individually, we're all part of a team. So, you have to work with those other people. I've benefited hugely from working relationships with all my colleagues, and now I continue to benefit from those working relationships, but now it's more my responsibility to make sure that we support other people in the organisation. And particularly with the new role that I'm doing, what's been quite exciting is it's kind of given me the opportunity to look wider across the whole business, because before I was very much focused in the soils team. Obviously knew what was going on around the rest of the business, but now kind of got that slightly more overarching view. We've got some really good new scientists, new researchers coming in, and you can see the people, can't you? You can see these people are going to do really well, and it's trying to make sure that you do give them those opportunities and you give them those extra pushes, and you tell them that they're doing well and they're going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it feels like you're paying it forward now. So yes, there's the formal training, but there's the empowering people through the gentle nudges. But there's also showing that you have faith in someone and their ability when they might not feel that for themselves just yet. So it's that as well. So thank you. Okay, so we've talked a bit about education and training and what might be or what might be not required to come into the industry. I'm wondering about soft skills, and I ask this I guess sometimes when people think of scientists, they think of a certain set of skills, mostly technical. So I'm really curious to get your take on what soft skills would help a soil scientist excel in your industry.
To answer the question, I would, I've said a couple of times already about, working on bigger projects and working as part of a team. We don't, definitely within the organisation that I work for, we don't work on our own. We work as part of a team. We do more and we achieve more when we work as part of a team. So it's very collaborative. I mean, Brian, who I already mentioned, he always used to say, we win together, we lose together. We're a team. But you do better quality work when you work with other people. And the projects we work on, they require collaboration. So those communication skills and working with other people and working for the good of the team, not just yourself, you will excel when you try and take your colleagues with you and you try and take your team with you. So I think communication skills are really important, but having said that, as an organisation, we have got now a real focus on neurodiversity as well, and recognising the talents across a range of different staff, not taking that default view of who's the person that you think that you need, because you might have people that don't fit that particular box or aren't great communicators that are brilliant at doing something else. So not pigeonholing anybody and trying to look at a huge range of people as such. So it don't feel you've got to fit a particular mold as such.
I think sometimes there can be a misconception that you have to be an extrovert and you have to be loud and talking about your achievements to get on, and that, I mean, it's true in some organisations, but hopefully not all.
And I mean, whilst it is important and does help if you can stand up and you can talk in front of people, you might get some individuals who really don't want to do that, and it's really not their thing. But should that prohibit them from a successful career when they are excelling in other areas? And so, I mean, part of having a team of people is trying to pick up the strengths and playing to the strengths of everybody in your team. And I think it's a really positive thing coming from the business, and they've been challenging us on recruitment and management to make sure that we're not recruiting duplicates of ourselves. We're looking right throughout the talent pool, etc. And we're not disadvantaging any. We try and get the best from everybody we've got working for us.
Thank you. If someone wants to find out more about soil science or the related fields, where would you suggest they go take a look, or what would you suggest they read or listen to?
Okay, so I think I might have mentioned the British Society of Soil Science earlier on. So I would definitely, if you Google the British Society of Soil Science, that's a fantastic resource. There's lots of information there. It's our professional membership organisation. All of the soil scientists I know are members, but they're also really good at encouraging, supporting early career scientists and new entrants to the industry. I mean, one of the advantages of COVID was the amount of information that then went online, wasn't it? So, I mean, the British Society of Soil Science, they put a lot of webinars online, so they're all available on YouTube. The other thing that I would flag is that quite a lot of these professional organisations, so there's others also like the Association of Applied Biologists, they will have early careers groups as well. So a lot of these organisations will have objectives to try and promote science and promote it to new entrants. They specifically want to support people coming into the industry. So if it's something that you're interested in soil science or in another biological science, I think finding the appropriate professional organisation, joining, because usually if you're a student or you're an early career member, the joining fees are really quite low. Join their early career groups, and quite often there's opportunities for courses. And I know with the British Society of Soil Science, they run some training courses on working for soils, and they also have grants and awards to help specifically designed for early career scientists. So even if you don't have the fundings to go on these courses, quite often the institutes will fund you to do them if you can't afford to. So, I mean, definitely worth looking at those.
Yeah, thank you. And tell us what the future holds for soil science.
Oh, definitely. There's definitely lots more to do. There's, I said at the beginning, there's huge challenges. I mean, there's a massive amount we don't know about soil, so there's lots more to learn. And it's going to continue to be really important into the future. So, I mean, the role and the challenges will continue to exist. It'll be interesting to see how how the research changes over time. We're often, there's new techniques, new technologies coming online that can help us do the research. So I've got the project proposal that I've got in at the moment that I'm waiting for an outcome on is actually with the European Space Agency, for using
wow.
satellite imagery. So, over time, as new technologies come online, it'll be interesting to see how the way we do research changes. But the role and the sector, I think, will continue to exist, and it'll be interesting to see how sort of project work evolves over time.
Yeah. Lizzie, what do you know now that you wish you'd known when you were just starting out on your career journey?
That's a really difficult one, isn't it? I looking back, I'm not sure I wish I'd known any of it now, because I think learning it was all part of the process. I mean, I could look back and say I wish I'd realised that if you pour tea over your laptop, it breaks. But other than a few stupid things like that, I don't think I'd want to give myself any shortcuts. I think it's all part of the journey, isn't it? And so I don't think I don't think there's anything in particular that I would go back and tell myself 20 years ago. I think you need to learn it.
Yeah. And what would you say to young Lizzie who wanted to be an artist?
Maybe when you retire.
Do you do any drawing now?
No, I don't. But I think we all have these odd things that we think, like, if I had a bit more time, I think I would like to do more creative stuff. So I sort of sometimes say to myself, learn the piano. I'd like to learn the piano, and I'd like to do more drawing. So I mean, there's never enough hours in the day, is there?
Maybe you could take up an evening class or something.
Maybe.
Lizzie, I'm wondering if you're a fan of quotes or inspirational mantras or phrases, and if so, might you share with us?
Yep. So I do have a quote that I share on social media on the 5th of December every year, because that is World Soils Day. So this is my favourite quote, and it's that man, despite all his accomplishments, owes his existence to a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains. So I quite like that one.
I like it. I like it.
So there is another very well known. There's another very well known one. Franklin Roosevelt. This is the one that's quite often quoted for soil. It's that the nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. So there are a few.
Yeah. Thank you. And finally, Lizzie, what is your secret to happiness and fulfillment at work?
Wow, big question, Jo. I think just you've got to do something that you like, and that I think to do something that you're interested in. On a day-to-day basis, you're always going to have challenges. Sometimes there are long days, sometimes things don't go quite to plan. But ultimately, I think I've stayed in the job that I'm doing for 20 years, and I anticipate hopefully I'll stay they'll keep me for a few more years. I'm still interested in it. I'm still learning new things. I think doing, and you spend a lot of time at work. And I know salary is a really important thing to people. It's quite often top of their list, and it is an important component, but actually doing something that you're interested in, I think, has got to be top of the list. And then working with people you like. If you happen to luck in somewhere with a great group of people, which I've been really lucky to do, I've never had any reason to look elsewhere. I've enjoyed the role, and the people I work with are great.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Lizzie, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been fantastic. I've learned so much, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. So any final words of wisdom or encouragement before we go?
I'm not sure. No, I've really enjoyed it as well. Jo, I mean, well done for you. When you asked me at the beginning what podcasts I've been listening to, this last week I have been listening to yours. And I know you aim the podcast at younger, I think you say 18 to 24-year-olds, but it's really interesting to listen to other people's career journeys as well. So thank you
so much.
Good luck to, if anyone's listening to this sort of early on in their career, go forth and have fun, have a blast.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. Thank you so much for joining Lizzie and I today on this enlightening journey through the world of soil science. We really hope that you enjoyed our conversation and gained valuable insights into this unique profession. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review wherever you enjoy your podcasts so you never miss an episode packed with career insights, inspiration and empowering advice. If you have any questions, comments or suggestions, do get in touch with us. We love hearing from you. So as we wrap up today's episode, I think it's only fitting that we end with the quotes that Lizzie shared. Roosevelt, who said, "The country that destroys its soil destroys itself." And the reminder from Paul Harvey that despite all of our accomplishments, we owe our existence to a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains. I think that really helps us keep things in perspective. Have a great week, whatever you are doing, and we will see you next time. Thanks again for tuning in. Bye now.